When Frank Sinatra stumbled onto The Tonight Show completely intoxicated, he nearly destroyed both their careers in one catastrophic night. What Johhny Carson did to save them became television legend. It was December 3rd, 1981, and Frank Sinatra was so intoxicated he could barely stand. But when he grabbed Carson's microphone and started insulting the audience, Johhny had just 30 seconds to prevent a career-ending disaster for both of them. Frank Sinatra was scheduled to appear on The Tonight Show to promote his upcoming Las Vegas residency. At 66 years old, the chairman of the board was television gold, a guaranteed ratings winner whenever he appeared with Johhny Carson. But from the moment Sinatra arrived at NBC's Burbank studios that Thursday evening, something was clearly wrong. The legendary singer had been drinking heavily at a Beverly Hills restaurant, celebrating his new recording sessions. His usual swagger was replaced by unsteady movements and slurred speech. He came in swaying, recalled longtime Tonight Show producer Fred de Cordova. Frank had been drinking, that was obvious, but he'd performed drunk before. We thought he could handle it. Sinatra's entourage seemed nervous. His bodyguard, Jilly Rizzo, kept trying to get him to drink coffee, but Sinatra waved him off dismissively. "I'm Frank Sinatra," he slurred to the backstage crew. "I don't need to be managed by anyone." Carson, preparing in his dressing room, received updates about Sinatra's condition but decided to proceed. The two men had been friends for years, and Carson trusted that Sinatra's professionalism would kick in once the cameras rolled. "Frank's a pro," Carson told Ed McMahon. "Even if he's had a few drinks, he knows how to work a room." The Tonight Show opened as usual, with Carson's monologue and familiar rhythm that 28 million Americans expected. The audience was in great spirits, laughing at Carson's current events jokes. "Tonight we have a very special guest," Carson announced. "A man who needs no introduction, the chairman of the board himself, Mr. Frank Sinatra." The audience erupted as the orchestra played "Fly Me to the Moon." But instead of Sinatra's usual confident entrance, what emerged was clearly a man struggling with balance and composure. Sinatra stumbled across the stage, caught himself on Carson's desk, and instead of sitting in the guest chair, remained standing, swaying under the bright lights. Carson stood to greet his guest warmly, but Sinatra barely acknowledged the gesture. He looked at the studio audience with confusion and growing irritation. "Frank, great to see you," Carson said, trying to guide Sinatra toward the chair. "How are you feeling tonight?" Sinatra squinted at Carson. "How am I feeling? How do you think I'm feeling, Johhny? I'm Frank Sinatra. I feel like Frank Sinatra." The audience laughed nervously, unsure if this was planned or if they were witnessing something uncomfortable unfolding. Carson tried to redirect. "Well, you look great. Tell us about the new album." But Sinatra wasn't listening. He stared at the audience with growing agitation. "You know what, Johhny? These people, they come here to see Frank Sinatra. And what do they get? They get to sit in uncomfortable chairs and pretend to laugh at jokes that aren't even funny." The studio audience shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't the charming Frank Sinatra they expected. "Well, Frank, I think they're here to see both of us," Carson said diplomatically. "Why don't you sit down, and we can talk about—" "Sit down," Sinatra interrupted, his voice rising. "I don't sit down for anyone, pal. I'm Frank Sinatra. I stand when I want to stand, I sit when I want to sit, and I say what I want to say." The situation spiraled rapidly. Doc Severinsen looked concerned from the orchestra. Ed McMahon was uncharacteristically silent. Sinatra began pacing behind Carson's desk, unsteady but increasingly confrontational. Then it happened. Sinatra reached over and grabbed Carson's desk microphone, pulling it toward himself and effectively hijacking the show. "You know what?" Sinatra said into the microphone, words slurring but clearly audible to millions watching at home. I've been thinking about this whole late-night television thing, and it's all wrong. It's all backwards. Carson stood beside his own desk, watching Sinatra commandeer his show. He faced an impossible choice: physically wrestle back the microphone and create an ugly scene, walk off his own show and commit professional suicide, or find a way to salvage this disaster. This was when Johhny Carson proved why he was the master of live television. Instead of fighting Sinatra or minimizing damage, Carson made a brilliant and risky decision. He would give Sinatra exactly what he seemed to want while protecting both of them. "Frank," Carson said quietly, leaning close to Sinatra's microphone, "what do you think is backwards about it?" Emboldened, Sinatra launched into a rambling, alcohol-fueled critique of television and entertainment. "These people," Sinatra gestured at the audience, "they sit there like sheep, waiting to be told when to laugh, when to clap, when to feel something. And you guys feed them this pablum, this sanitized version of entertainment." The audience sat in stunned silence. Some looked uncomfortable, others fascinated by the train wreck unfolding. "You want to know what real entertainment is?" Sinatra continued, swaying slightly. "Real entertainment is danger. It's not knowing what's going to happen next." He paused mid-sentence, looking like he might fall over. Carson walked over and gently placed his hand on Sinatra's shoulder. "You know what, Frank? You're absolutely right. This audience deserves some real entertainment tonight." Sinatra looked at Carson with surprise and gratitude. "That's right, Johhny. That's exactly right. So here's what we're going to do," Carson announced confidently. "Frank Sinatra is going to give you something you've never seen before on television. A completely unscripted, completely unrehearsed performance. No net, no script. Just pure Frank Sinatra." The audience perked up with interest. Carson had transformed a career-ending disaster into the promise of something special. "Frank," Carson said, "you've always said the best performances come from the heart, not from a script. So why don't you show these people what that looks like?" Sinatra's ego engaged despite his intoxicated state. "Damn right, Johhny. Let's show them what real entertainment looks like." What followed was remarkable. Despite his obvious intoxication and earlier hostility, when Frank Sinatra began to sing, magic happened. He started with "My Way," but not the polished version audiences usually heard. This was raw, emotional, deeply personal. His voice cracked on some notes, but the emotion was more powerful than technical perfection. The audience, uncomfortable just minutes before, found themselves drawn into something genuine and moving. This wasn't sanitized entertainment. This was a legendary performer laying his soul bare on live television. While Sinatra sang, Carson quietly orchestrated the technical aspects. He signaled camera operators for close-ups, rather than wide shots that might emphasize unsteady movements. He gestured to lighting crew for more intimate, concert-like atmosphere. Most importantly, Carson positioned himself to catch Sinatra if he stumbled, without making it obvious to viewers that he was providing support. When Sinatra finished, the studio audience erupted in genuine, heartfelt applause. Not polite talk show clapping, but appreciation reserved for concert halls and Vegas showrooms. Sinatra, clearly moved by the response, looked at the crowd with tears in his eyes. The hostility had completely disappeared, replaced by vulnerability and genuine emotion. "You know," Sinatra said quietly, "I've been performing for 50 years, and sometimes you forget why you started doing this in the first place." Carson stepped forward, placing his arm around Sinatra's shoulders. "Frank, I think everyone here knows exactly why you started doing this, and we're all grateful that you did." The moment transcended usual television boundaries. The audience was witnessing something real and unguarded from one of America's most iconic performers. Carson, sensing the emotional peak and knowing it was time to close before anything else went wrong, made another masterful decision. "Ladies and gentlemen," Carson announced, "I think we've just witnessed something very special here tonight." Frank Sinatra, completely unrehearsed, completely from the heart. He turned to Sinatra. "Frank, I think you've just proven your point about real entertainment. Thank you for sharing that with us." Sinatra, exhausted from the emotional performance, nodded gratefully. "Thanks, Johhny. You're a good friend." Carson helped guide Sinatra to the guest chair, where he sat heavily, all fight gone out of him. For the remainder of the segment, Carson conducted a gentle, supportive conversation. He asked easy questions about Sinatra's career and memories, giving the singer time to recover while providing intimate insights for the audience. During commercial break, Sinatra's handlers helped him to his dressing room. When the show returned, Carson was alone at his desk. "Folks," Carson said to camera, "sometimes television gives you moments you didn't plan for, didn't expect, but that remind you why we do this job." Frank Sinatra just gave us one of those moments. Within hours, the entertainment industry buzzed about what happened. Critics initially panned Sinatra's appearance as unprofessional, but as the clip was replayed and analyzed, opinion shifted. "Carson didn't just save Sinatra from humiliation," wrote Los Angeles Times critic Howard Rosenberg. "He turned what could have been career-ending disaster into one of the most genuine moments in television history." Music industry insiders praised Carson's handling. "Johhny protected Frank while giving the audience something real and memorable," said producer Quincy Jones. "That takes incredible skill and genuine friendship." The incident strengthened Carson and Sinatra's bond. Sinatra, who remembered little due to his intoxicated state, was initially mortified. But when he saw the footage and positive response, he understood what Carson had done. "Johhny saved my ass that night," Sinatra told friends privately. "He could have let me make a fool of myself, but instead he made me look like Frank Sinatra." Carson never publicly discussed the incident in detail, but those close to him knew he considered it one of his finest moments as a television host, demonstrating quick thinking and genuine care that separated great entertainers from merely competent ones. The Sinatra incident became a legendary example of live television at its best and most unpredictable. It was cited in journalism schools as example of handling unexpected situations with grace and professionalism. More importantly, it became testament to friendship's power in entertainment industry. Carson had risked his own reputation to protect a friend, creating something more valuable than either could have planned. For Sinatra, what could have been humiliating became a defining moment of vulnerability and authenticity. The performance was included in career retrospectives and cited as example of his ability to connect with audiences emotionally. Carson's handling enhanced his reputation as not just skilled television host, but man of character and loyalty. Industry insiders knew working with Carson meant being treated with respect and protected when things went wrong. The story became more than television anecdote. It reminded that sometimes most powerful entertainment comes from genuine human moments, not scripted perfection. Carson showed that true professionalism wasn't avoiding mistakes or uncomfortable situations. It was handling them with grace, creativity, and care for people involved. Years later, television historians pointed to the Sinatra incident as a perfect example of why Johhny Carson was considered master of his craft. He took potentially catastrophic situation and transformed it into something memorable and meaningful. The incident demonstrated unique power of live television to create authentic moments that couldn't be replicated or planned. Carson and Sinatra had given audiences something genuine and unrehearsed in an era of increasingly manufactured entertainment. More than 40 years later, the story is still told in Hollywood as example of handling crisis with class, turning disaster into triumph, and how genuine friendship can create something more powerful than any scripted entertainment. If this incredible story of friendship, crisis, and live television magic moved you, make sure to subscribe and hit that thumbs up button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear about the power of protecting your friends and turning disasters into triumphs. Have you ever seen someone save a situation with quick thinking and genuine care? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to ring that notification bell for more amazing true stories about the moments that define us.